the Nevertron. I'll break it down into a couple of different. Gary, Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of illegal ivory in the world.
Live in a third world nation where your votes will get stolen if you can vote there at all.
Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters. And by the way, I have to say this. I've been watching the James Bond movies, so I have to say I am Waters, Dane. I mean, anyway, Gary, that just ignore me, Gary. I'm a crazy man. I'm honored to have with me Gary Emineth. Gary, tell us about you. Are you in North Dakota or where are you right now?
I am in North Dakota. I'm a North Dakota native, but I've traveled the world. I've put on 3 million miles traveling around the world. So I've been out and about in many places, done a business, serial entrepreneur, been involved in politics for 40 years in North Dakota and nationally. And so I've been involved in a number of initiatives, but I always talk about my politics. I'm a Ronald Reagan baby. I was a high school guy when I made my decision to start following Ronald Reagan and became a conservative.
Well, listen, I don't know if you know this, but my very first political job, if you want to call that, I was a motorcade driver in Ronald Reagan's motorcade in Birmingham, Alabama. That was my very first gig.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
My dream as a young man in my 20s was to meet Ronald Reagan. And I was the executive director of the Republican Party, and I was in my mid 20s. And he came to North Dakota, for a U.S. Senate race. And I got to get a picture with him, which I still cherish, and it's on my wall
wow.
to this day.
Okay. So for a background, I mean, I've known Gary, just for the audience, this is a global. I mean, I've known Gary for many years. Gary and I worked together on the trying to stop Donald Trump from being president way back when. Not very successful, as we all know. But you're a very accomplished individual. You're very supportive. You've had me on your show. By the way, tell us real quick about your podcast, your TV show.
Well, I do a show on a statewide North Dakota TV station called Beck TV, but I podcast. It's called Open Range, and I focus on North Dakota issues typically. But I've had you on because there are international issues that impact North Dakota, and that's when I do something like that. I bring someone like yourself on that's an expert in a particular field, and I like it. It's an hour-long format, so we sit and we chat for an hour about all kinds of issues that are going on around the world. But many times they have a very much a North Dakota slant, so it's called Open Range.
Well, listen, I encourage everyone to listen to it. It's a great show. I mean, and listen, it's a lot fancier than this show, but let's get to our topic. Our topic today is the 250th anniversary of America. And and as I was telling you earlier, that in the second part of this show, I'm going to have a guy from the UK on, and we're going to get his perspective on what it's like to have lost the war against America. Anyway, so let's just start with the basic. 250 years ago, on July 4th, America was founded. And do you believe that America has lived up to the promise of our founding fathers?
I absolutely do. I think there was a lot of people worried in the Civil War, but how we came out of the Civil War in the mid 1800s and how we fought for freeing the African Americans and blacks was very important to this country, even though our founding fathers didn't deal with it early on. But I think that America's continued to move towards freedom, liberty, capitalism, free markets, and it's just the best form of government, I think, in the world. It's not perfect, but when you strive to give people liberty and freedom economically and otherwise, I think it frees humans up to be who they're meant to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always tell my friends, and on the show, we always talk about how democracy is messy. I mean, and that's the thing about America. I mean, it's when you're fighting for freedom and democracy. Listen, if you want everything to happen, one way every day, then live in a dictatorship. But if you don't live in a democracy, you have to understand that it is going to be messy. So let's talk about, in your experience or in your thought process there, what do you think are the greatest accomplishments America has had over 250 years?
I think what it's done through innovation and by people being free to be who they wanted to be. Kind of Reagan talked about it being this light on the hill, this beacon. And I think America has been that because we value and cherish freedom and liberty. I worry sometimes when America's moved after 9/11 towards worrying all about security. But I think the idea of being that light of beacon of America continually promoting freedom and liberty, and of course capitalism, which is, I think, the only type of free markets type of thing is what drives America. Even though we're seeing some changes, what President Trump's leading us towards a little bit sometimes, but I think America's continued beacon of light to the world has been so very important.
What do you think about, as I travel the world, I run into people who, you either find people who love America or hate America, and or either love Trump or hate Trump. It's just one of those. I mean, do you believe that America? I mean, you said you believe that we have lived up to to what the vision of our founding fathers was, but do you think that we're going through some challenges now?
We are definitely going through challenges. I think what happens is with young people, they're revolutionary type people. When I was young, I wanted to change the world, and as I've gotten older, I've kind of retreated a little bit and say, maybe we need to keep things as they are a little bit. But I think America, what's been great is we strive to get young people to innovate and reinvent things, and that worries me that we if we want to mess with the Constitution, which progressives tend to want to do. I think it's important for us to encourage young people to innovate and create and do those kind of things, because that's what drives the wealth and the capitalism of what that does, and help people understand freedom. But I do worry about what's going on in New York right now with the idea of moving towards socialism. We've seen the two extremes, and I think when President Trump got elected in 16, and now we're seeing a little bit of what I'd call his revenge tour, if you will. I don't think that's good, and I worry about that, because it's very important for us to preserve our Constitution and hold true to what that is. And he seems to want to be totally in charge of everything.
Well, he does. And I just wrote an op-ed for the 400th anniversary, 400, the 250th anniversary for July 4th about America, and I talk about how it's the great experiment. America is the great experiment, and the experiment continues. And this is the thing when you talk about what's happening in New York City and other parts of America. I mean, where you have socialists being elected, to governors and mayors. I mean, it's part of the experiment. And I think that what makes America so strong is not necessarily the individuals, but the institutions we have. We have a tremendous amount of checks and balances. I mean, do you believe that the institutions that were created by our founding fathers are working the way they were designed to work?
100%. But I worry that we move away from it a little bit, because on the progressive side, they want to kind of mess with the Constitution, and they want to kind of make it this living document and holding true to it. So sometimes I worry that we're moving a little bit too fast, even though it's 250 years. We're relatively an old nation, but we're relatively a young nation. It's kind of a paradox of what we are. But as a republic or democracy, we're one of the longest ever, I believe. And so the challenge is when you try to reinvent yourself and you see AI coming on and the technologies, what is the impact that has? Because it can pivot so quickly, and it can get out. It can happen so fast, and it's so fragile. And that's what I think is the thing that's has shocked me, is how we've been able as a country stay true to who we were by allowing all of these interactions and debates and discussions. And I have a lot of liberal friends that we have great discussions, but I worry because we've become very hostile to one another if we're not, singing from the same sheet of music. And so, even though America was founded in pretty rough times, they did a lot of fighting. I believe rigorous debate discussion is important. And when you lose, you get together as Americans, you come together, and you got another 4 years to then start all over, because that's what's great about our system.
Well, I agree with that. I think that, one thing, freedom of speech is a critical thing for the success of any democracy. But we've gotten to a point in America where it's very difficult to have civil dialogue anymore. And that's what concerns
Yeah.
me the most about our country. But I want to talk about states' rights for a second. I mean, on my show, when I talk about America, I usually talk about the entire country, right? But you're from North Dakota. And I mean, being from North Dakota, I mean, talk to me about how you think states' rights. Do you believe that the federal government is giving enough rights to the states? Do you think they're taking away too many rights? I mean, do you feel that balance that our founding fathers had envisioned is working?
That's a great question. I really believe the federal government's continued to grow and become larger. and take rights away from the states. And that's where states have had to push back. Really, when we were founded, we really were, the 13 original colonies were really like 13 countries operating independent of everything, weren't they? And consequently, when they came together as a country, everything, changed, and they had to give up something, but they did fight for those state rights. And I even see, like right now with the federal government dealing with issues like AI and how they want to deal with these data centers, or AI data centers, if you will. They began to start imposing rules that they can say this is the better most important part of what our country needs to do. And when those things start happening, it messes with property rights, it messes with landowners. And that's where states, every state should be able to make some of those decisions themselves. So I think the federal government has grown way too big. I think Trump has tried to make some changes, but in the end, it seemed like he's almost expanding it, even though he talks about doing it. But so when they get into power, they don't seem to cut back like they can, because the bureaucracy continues to grow.
And let's talk about the 250th anniversary. I mean, they're in North Dakota. Like, I run across Americans all over the world recently, and it's funny how many don't even know it's the 250th anniversary of America. I mean, is that something that you're hearing in North Dakota that's important to people, or they're just not really talking about it? I mean, it's a big milestone.
Yeah, it's a very important milestone. It's a big deal in North Dakota because President Trump's actually flying into North Dakota on July 1st, because we haven't had anybody that's really that's been a president from North Dakota, but we claim Teddy Roosevelt, who was, early 1900s. He spent a lot of time in Western North Dakota in what they call the Badlands. So the state of North Dakota has vast reserves of oil. It's called the Bakken, and they do a lot of shale and fracking going on up here. And so we have so much money in North Dakota, billions and billions of dollars sitting in our bank accounts. And so we've spent, I don't know, a couple $100 million, and we've raised another $200 million. And we're launching the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library. And
Wow.
it's being open to the public on July 4th, 250th anniversary. So we spent about $400 million on Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library, and President Trump's flying in his new Air Force One plane that he got, and it's exciting for North Dakota. And so it's bringing, I think, a lot more attention to North Dakota, because we used to be a flyover state. So that's the issue when you become a small state like North Dakota. It's a pretty good sized area. It's, let's say, 400 miles by 500 miles square. And only less than 1 million people, 800,000 people live in the state. But we have billions of dollars because of the oil reserves, a lot of natural resources, lots of water, and of course, lots of wind. So we have a lot of wind energy going on as well up here. So there's a lot of, Dane, there's a lot of interest in the 250, because I think President Trump coming in and not being a flyover state like we were in the past has given us more national exposure than we've had in the past.
Listen, I love North Dakota. I mean, but I will tell you, the coldest I have ever been was in North Dakota. I was there and tried to walk into a store, and the actually door was frozen to the building because it was so cold there. And people, like, I can't imagine. One time I had to put gas in the car in North Dakota when it was like minus 40, and it was just like outrageous. So, but it is a beautiful state. It's amazing though that you're doing the library for Teddy Roosevelt. He's one of my favorite presidents of all time. So impressive in that regard.
Oh,
But let's talk
it's
about
very
the 200.
impressive property.
Well, so as far as the rest, a lot's been made of this the celebration of the 4th of July, and apparently there
Yeah.
was going to be some kind of concert or something in D.C. But a lot of people have pulled out of what the Trump and the administration was planning. I mean, to me, if you're an American, you should all rally for the 4th of July. You shouldn't make it personal and say, oh, just because I don't like Trump. I mean, listen, Trump happens to be president now. But it's the 250th anniversary of our country, and I think everyone should come together. I mean, what do you make of this, where people are pulling out of these events because of President Trump?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, President Trump always pushes the limits on everything, whether he's doing it in Europe and NATO and on and on and on it goes. And then he overstates things. And so he just kind of frankly upsets people with a lot of the rhetoric that he offers. And he's not always 100% accurate in many of his claims. And it just stirs the pot, right? It gets people frustrated. But I mean, he's made a lot of changes in this country for the good. And I just wish he would focus on some of those kind of things. But because of the energy, I mean, probably controversial, no one more controversial in American. Jesus Christ was probably the most controversial figure in the history of the world. And next to him, when you see what polarizes people or what happens, you find Donald Trump's right up there with that. And of course, sometimes he claims to be the Messiah himself. So that creates a little bit of some dilemma. And so the energy against it it's unfortunate because no matter what he says, the Democrats take the opposite position in this country, and it's been bad for America. And my hope is that we can come back together after President Trump's moved on, and we as a country come together as people, supporting people around the world, fighting for democracy and liberty, and continuing being that light and that beacon of hope for the world.
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing's frustrating when I do travel the world is that I sadly find that the people do not respect America like they once did. And that's just the reality. And it's really sad and difficult. And that has a lot to do with what America is doing. I mean, President Trump, listen, it's very clear I am not a President Trump fan. I mean, the whole world knows I'm not a President Trump fan. To me, his administration is a very transactional administration, but he has done some good things, as you're talking about. But I also do believe that this, for the 250th anniversary, we all need to set aside the polarization, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whether you're from North Dakota, Alabama, New York, or wherever, and come together and celebrate 250 years of this grand experiment. And it's very frustrating that we just can't seem to get past that. But let's go back to North Dakota again. I mean, what do you think? Like, if you were president of the United States and you were or governor of North Dakota, talk to me about some of the things that you'd like to see change in this country.
Well, first of all, one of our big problems we have in this country, we have to deal with our national debt. And I appreciate what President Trump has started saying, that Europe's got to begin to defend itself. We can't keep funding around the world like we have. And North Dakota, we have lots of reserves, and we are investing a lot of money. And I sometimes think we get to be a little crony capitalistic because people take advantage of the state's wealth, and then we begin to put money into projects that are private government related. I think the government should do what's basic necessary to what it's done, defending the country, our military, and those kind of things. But we need to have lower taxes and take care of our elderly, take care of the poor. But when Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey were running the Congress many years ago, they began, and Bill Clinton was president. They had reform for the welfare system, and it's continued to grow, and our proportion to what we've had to do in spending has been a problem because we've tried to fund the world's all these issues, whether it's the UN, et cetera. We pay a disproportionate amount of so many things around the world. We have to get aligned so we can get our debt under control, or we will be on our way to a banana republic, because that dollar has to be strong. And I worry about that, Dane, that we continue to spend money we don't have. And I'm actually at the age where I'm on Social Security, and I still work even though I'm on Social Security. But the idea that I've paid into a system is on the verge of being to some degree bankrupt, and mortgaged so far to the hilt that our Congress and Washington doesn't seem to get it. They just keep spending, and they have these big, beautiful bills, and they come up with these cool slogans and spend money to create new prosperity, but it's just mortgaging the future for our children. It's a very scary situation as far as I'm concerned for the country in the next 10 years if we don't correct course.
Well, I agree. By the way, I didn't know you could be on Social Security at 32 years of age. So,
Yeah, right.
Well, you definitely you look great for your age, which I definitely don't think is that old. But anyway, so I agree. Listen, our debt, it's amazing. When I was younger, I mean, we're close to the same age. When I was younger, we'd see the debt clock. We talk about how we have to do something about it, and that is an issue that has just really fallen off the radar. But if we don't get control of that debt, we will not see another 250th birthday. But once again, the difficulty is, once again, I don't want to keep talking about me traveling around the world, but there is a role and responsibility for America around the world. I mean, we talk about these these soft investments and soft power. And I've seen firsthand, and whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's in Botswana, whether it's in South America, our absence is being filled by Russia and China. Okay, and that's just
Yep.
the reality. And so even though a lot of Americans don't like spending money globally, but the reality is how we keep, the bad actors, the evil, from getting closer to our shores. And so it's a trade-off. So I understand. Listen, there's a lot of bloat in the federal government. Some of the changes at the State Department were very important. But it is something that we have to, it's not an either or. We have to find that balance, and America has not found that balance about investing globally and then investing back home. But let's talk about history for a second. We only have a few minutes left here. Historically, what do you think are the most pivotal points in America's history in 250 years?
Well, first of all, when we came together and they wrote the Constitution, which was 10 years after the Declaration of Independence, when they brought it together and they established that our Constitution is about we the people. That is so much different. And when you look at other countries' Constitution, it starts out the government or we the government, but the idea that it's about we the people, that is a very pivotal time when America basically said we have inalienable rights that we have as humans. And when we begin to hold the government accountable, and I think it's Thomas Paine talked about how important it is for our hold the government accountable, and that it's our job to protect them from becoming too powerful. And so I think that Constitution, when that was written, that was very important. The Civil War was a very important time of freeing up slavery. And then when women rights came out, women voting, I mean, America's, it's funny where we've come in such a short time. And you take, going back a couple thousand years, what America's done, allowing people to have the freedom to do those kind of things. And obviously coming to the aid of Europe and people around the world fighting for liberty and freedom, we do a lot to protect our own interests, but at the same time, it's because America is a very generous nation from what I've observed over the years as I've traveled internationally and I think people have lost a little bit of that around the world because we can be a little arrogant. And I think if Americans would travel more internationally, they would have a much better respect and appreciation for other countries' heritage and their history. We tend to be a little arrogant and cocky. And when I always travel internationally, I say, I'm not going to act like a stupid American because we can do that so easily because we are blessed. We're living in an amazing time, an amazing country with amazing things happening. And the world's going to change dramatically with AI. And so America's role, that I would make it more generic, but the idea of innovation and technology and how it's allowed our country to prosper. And I think the idea that's important for us is always, rather than just giving money out, the old saying is, teach someone to fish rather than giving them just free fish, because all of a sudden they only can last until the fish is gone. And so I think America's role needs to be in that area and make those kind of investments to help lift it up as Newt Gingrich, not Newt, Jack Kemp talked about all boats rise in the water together. And that's a really important philosophy. It's always been a part of what I believe is important about America is the idea that if we can help other people, they get better their economy, it helps us grow. And we have to push back against China more so. I'm even more worried about China than Russia. And they've figured out how to do some things differently, it looks like to me, and be a state-run and total socialist communist country that oppresses their people, and people just don't talk about it enough. The rest of the world and Africa and around the world need to understand it's an oppressive regime. And America, while we're not perfect, we believe in liberty and freedom.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on about that. I mean, China is, to me, the greatest threat in the world. I mean, Russia is, dealing the Ukraine war. Russia, they're a bunch of thugs. I mean, there's no doubt about that there's a problem. But China, if you look around the world, it's basically enslaving countries financially. And now it's greater use of AI. It's creating new AI that it's controlling around the world. I mean, China is a threat. Everyone around the world, whether you're in North Dakota or Miami or New York or LA, or whether you're in any part of the world, like even here in Kuala Lumpur where I am, you need to be worried about China because China is a great threat. No, I think the Civil War, I agree with you. I think that we fought, America could have gone either way during the Civil War. And I think we're very lucky that we had a great leader, Abraham Lincoln. Then you look at people like Teddy Roosevelt, you look at like Ronald Reagan, he's an idol of mine, like he is of yours. I mean, America, there's been several opportunities for us to go the other way, but we've been very lucky in where we are. So where do you think we'll be? I mean, do you think America we have what it takes to be around another 250 years from now?
I do, but I do fear that it's going to look a lot different. I think if we don't get our debt under control, we won't be as wealthy and generous as we have been in the past. So we have to correct that. But I believe if we continue to innovate and encourage our young people, the old Reagan used to talk about, the next generation stands on the other generation's shoulders. If we can do that to invite our young people to continue and continue innovating and creating things. And I believe in immigration for America. We've thrived by bringing a lot of people from around the world came here for liberty and freedom. We need to get that figured out in our country, because while Trump was correct about a country without borders is a problem, but we need to loosen it up and encourage people to continue coming here, because we get some of the best people in the world to come to this country with what it has to offer. We need to continue to encourage that. And I think by doing that, we can be continue for the next 250 years. I absolutely believe we can, but we got to correct some things, and we got to quit having these circular firing squads that are going on right now in this country.
No, you're right. We do have to fix a lot of things. And immigration, I'm glad you brought it up, because we are a country founded on. Listen, my great grandfather was Scottish, and my great grandmother was Irish. I mean, I'm a product of immigration in this country now. But we do have to get it under control. There's a difference between illegal immigration and legal immigration. But we are the great melting pot, and we should be proud of being the great melting pot, because that's where all these innovations have come from, and we need to continue that in some way. Well, parting words, let's just figure out here. If you could say anything, you talk a lot about the youth, which I'm proud of, because, the youth are the future, no matter what. Us old folks aren't going to be around that much longer. But if you could give any words of encouragement to the young people, what would it be?
I would say continue to innovate, understand what liberty and freedom mean to you and your family in the future, because it matters to the rest of the world what we have to offer. And you can't get your head around freedom enough unless you really think about it. And I believe you need to have some faith in a higher being. And as a Christian, who I am, I believe that's important. But I do believe that we as young people, not me, but young people, need to be continually caring for people and reaching out. And I think what's happened is a lot of them through the university system has kind of messed up and brainwashed a lot of young people, that in a sense that they had a philosophy like pushing very hard on them. Use your mind, be creative, and be a critical thinker, because we wanted our boys to be critical thinkers and be willing to ask questions. And when you do that, you reevaluate yourself and your country, and you can correct course sometimes when it needs to be corrected.
Those are important words. And I think the only thing I want to add to that is that, the young people don't need to take freedom for granted. Freedom is not free.
Yeah.
Okay. It is not. And that's, and I see that, I have an amazing son. I love him to death. And he's starting to understand that freedom isn't free. And, and that's how we have such a great country. Listen, Gary, it really is a pleasure. I love
Dane,
being on
thank
your
you.
show. And anyway, so I'm going to have to let you go. Say thanks for being with Dane Waters,
Thank
for
you.
Around the World with Dane Waters. And we'll be back. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with our next guest.